Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Aaron Porras, and coming up in today's newscast, Prime Minister Netanyahu urges his supporters to act calmly and responsibly. An Iranian athlete gets ready to face Israelis for his very first time, and later we'll take a look at how Thanksgiving is celebrated in the Holy Land. Responding to the accusations against him Tuesday night, Prime Minister Netanyahu says that we need to pressure the Israeli justice system and avert the left's attempted coup, that Netanyahu is facing charges of fraud, breach of trust, and bribery across 3 different criminal probes. Both he and his supporters argue not only that he's innocent, but that these particular charges have never been issued against anyone, let alone against a sitting prime minister. But now, just 24 hours after addressing thousands of his supporters at the Tel Aviv Museum, Netanyahu is calling for calm. In a video posted to social media, the Prime Minister is still thanking his base and denouncing the media, but walking back on the tone of some earlier rhetoric, Netanyahu says that it's important to act responsibly.
תודה רבה לכם על התמיכה האדירה. ריגשתם אותי מאוד. אני יודע שגורמים בתקשורת תמיד ייקחו מקרים בודדים מתוך האלפים שהיו שם כדי לעשות לכם דלגיטימציה. וזה בניגוד גמור להתעלמות המוחלטת שלהם ממקרים חמורים בהרבה בהפגנות השמאל. ובכל זאת, יש לי בקשה אחת. חשוב לנהוג באחריות במסגרת החוק, ללא התלהמות וללא אלימות. אנחנו מכבדים את החוק, ואנחנו מכבדים את בתי המשפט. אני בטוח שגם הצדק וגם האמת יצאו לאור.
Meanwhile, with less than 2 weeks left to form a government and avoid landmark third elections, Knesset Speaker and Likud MK Yuli Edelstein is inviting negotiators from the rival Blue and White Party under Chairman Benny Gantz. The 120 lawmakers in Israel's parliament must get at least 61 Knesset members to recommend a prime minister in order to form a coalition. But with chances being low, Edelstein calls on the Likud and the Blue and White leaders to choose between leadership and cowardice, quote, between the will of the public and a tremendous crisis of trust. Still, it looks like Edelstein's calls are in vain, as Blue and White officials have already responded, saying that they're willing to sit with the Likud and that they're even ready to accept a rotational agreement for the Prime Minister's office, provided Gantz goes first. But they will not sit in a government with Netanyahu before he's acquitted of all charges, which is highly unlikely to happen anytime soon before the deadline. Now joining us with more in the Israeli world of politics, we're joined by Israeli journalist, author, and attorney, Ben-Dror Yamini. Ben-Dror, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Now, you wrote a few days ago an article about why, maybe we should prosecute the prosecutors. Why is that?
Because we have a history of 20, 30 years of this kind of behavior on behalf of the General Attorney. Speaking about, for example, the indictment against Yaakov Ne'eman, who was Professor Yaakov Ne'eman, who was a justice minister. I mean, they gave him something like few days and they just kicked him out with such a ridiculous indictment. By the way, he was totally acquitted by court. And it happened again with investigations that was against Ruby Rivlin, who was only in that time, now he's a president, he was a candidate to be the justice minister. And we can go on and on. I mean, it happened many times. And other flaws. I mean, for example, the very known story, at least in Israel, of Ruth David, who was an attorney in the Justice Ministry. And I mean, nobody investigated her. Now, what is happening to you? I mean, we have a problem. We have a problem. It should be investigated.
So I mean, that's it. What are the issues with the prosecution, with the prosecutors, and the way that they conducted this investigation?
Look, in the last 2-3 months, so many things were exposed about the ways they investigated some of the people that were involved. And the links, I mean, yes, as a journalist, how wonderful that every protocol and every testimony is linked to the media. But it's... You read the testimonies, and you understand that somebody is running after Netanyahu. It is clear cut. I'm not saying that he is clear. I'm not saying that he should be exempted.
You're not speaking to the charges themselves or Netanyahu's innocence.
I'm speaking about the way of the investigation. I mean, we have a real problem. We have a real problem. And you cannot exempt the general attorney and his attorneys from investigation about why did it happen? Why they were so biased? And you see, you know what, there are many things that you see with the body language of the people involved and so on.
So is Israel's democracy weakened by this type of behavior, as Netanyahu and many of his supporters allege?
No, what I think is that the Israel democracy is quite strong, and the very fact that we can debate about it, the very fact that we can speak about it and expose it and not be biased. I mean, you cannot be all the time only against Netanyahu and people speak, of course, about his indictment. The very fact that we can speak about General Attorney and the Justice Ministry and and all the flows, this is part of a democracy.
And do you think that then, again, another allegation from the Netanyahu camp is that the Justice Ministry has too much power, or rather that the judges.
I buy it completely. I mean, I never voted for Netanyahu, I have to admit, but I mean, I said it for years as a lawyer. I mean, I wrote so many articles against them, because of so many things that were exposed and they think that they are running the country many times. I mean, enough. We have to investigate it, not in order to damage the rule of law. Just the opposite. I want to strengthen the rule of law. And that's why we should criticize, we should expose, we should not give anybody an exemption from criticism.
And you think the Supreme Court, again, is too involved in this case as well?
In Israel we call it legal activism. I mean, it's almost imperialism. It's not only activism. I mean, they decide about everything. I mean, every legitimate decision of the government, many times they think that it's their job to review it and to change it. I mean, it's too much. It does not happen in any other country. Wow. I mean, it went too much here in Israel.
All right, well, we have a lot to think about. We have 2 weeks left in the deadline.
Yeah.
We'll see if anything happens.
Even less. Yeah.
Ben-Dor, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, moving on, with Naftali Bennett as acting Israeli defense minister, the IDF is now redefining how it responds to Palestinian terrorism. In a statement released by the IDF Thursday morning, the military is confirming overnight operations in Judea and Samaria, or the West Bank, in which they demolished 4 homes belonging to the Palestinians connected to the murder of 18-year-old yeshiva student Dvir Sorek. Sorek was stabbed to death in August 2019 while on the way to a religious seminary where he studied, and cousins Nasir and Qasem Asafra were later charged with the murder, while 3 others have been indicted in connection. The IDF sees the practice of terrorist home demolitions as a deterrent to future terrorist attacks, while the Palestinians see it as an ineffective collective punishment. Either way, Defense Minister Bennett says that a heavy price must be exacted against all who raise a hand against Israeli citizens. And that's why now, in addition to home demolitions, Bennett has issued a new policy directive. The IDF will no longer release the bodies of terrorists for burial, regardless of which terror group they belong to, and exceptions will only be made at the defense minister's discretion. Finally, the directive is expected to be introduced at the next Security Cabinet meeting as part of a larger policy on deterrence. And this also reportedly follows a request made by Prime Minister Netanyahu 10 days ago after meeting with the families of Hadar Golden and Oron Shaul, 2 Israeli soldiers whose remains have been held hostage by Hamas in Gaza for over 5 years' time. Now heading to Israel's northern neighbors, the crises in the Arab world may be taking a shift for the worse as nationwide protests continue to erupt across Lebanon, Iraq, and Iran. Marking a definite change in the tone of their protests, Iraqi anti-government demonstrators have now burned down the Iranian consulate building in the holy city of Najaf in southern Iraq Wednesday night. And 6 protesters have since been killed, with 35 others being injured after the police began firing live ammunition into the crowd to prevent them from entering the building. But since protests began in early October, over 350 people have been killed by pro-government forces, with thousands more wounded. Still, demonstrators attacked the Iranian consulate building and replaced the Iranian flag with the Iraqi one, while the consulate staff escaped unharmed out the back. Then, after the wild event subsided, Iraqi authorities called for an emergency curfew to get people off the streets. But protesters accused the Shiite-led government of being corrupt to no end, while poor public services and out-of-control unemployment rates deteriorate further. They also say that Iranian influence is growing too strong in Iraqi affairs, as evidenced by the overnight arson. Iran publicly announces time and again its intentions to wipe Israel off the face of the earth, and in the last few decades it's been working tirelessly to spread its hegemonic authority into other Middle East nations. But now the people are fighting back.
الشباب حرقوها، فالشغب عندهم احنا ما حرقنا القنصرية، عبالك حرقنا العراق كله، الشغب مال النجف كله اجى علينا. والرصاص الحي والدخانيات الله وكيلك دخانات بحضننا قامت تطيح، مطر مثل المطر.
مظاهرات سلمية، لا اكو حرق، لا اكو تخريب، لا اكو قطع طرق. فترة 30 يوم الحكومة ما استجابت لأي شيء معنا. كأنما احنا مو بشر، احنا مو شعب.
Iraq is not where the pandemonium ends, though. In Lebanon, ongoing protests erupted overnight into more clashes between supporters and opponents of Lebanon's president. And aggressions came out in the form of fistfights and stone throwing all throughout the nation's cities and villages. Lebanon's Red Cross also reports 16 people have been detained. Demonstrations in Lebanon have been running since mid-October as well, and they came to a head when Prime Minister Saad Hariri stepped down. But protesters are also marching against Iranian proxy Hezbollah, the internationally recognized terror group which operates as a political faction in Lebanon's parliament and also calls for the destruction of Israel. Finally, though, protests are also sweeping Iran, where authorities are just now beginning to acknowledge the scale of the demonstrations. In fact, around 7,000 people are thought to have been arrested since clashes broke out November 15th. And Amnesty International says that security forces in Iran are responsible for the killings of 143 protesters. However, only 5 deaths have been confirmed, leading Human Rights Watch to accuse Iran of deliberately covering up the death and arrest numbers. Iranian officials, on the other hand, are blaming the street violence on, quote, thugs, who they claim are being sent to Iran to incite violence from Saudi Arabia, the United States, and you guessed it, Israel. In other news, it seems that the controversial plan to install cable cars in Jerusalem is hitting another snag in the High Court of Justice. Aside from arguing that it'll be an eyesore, a group of Israeli archaeologists, architects, and researchers are all now pleading with the Israeli high courts to scrap plans to construct a cable car line to the Western Wall in Jerusalem's Old City. The plan is supposed to attract tourism and is expected to carry up to 3,000 people per hour during peak traffic, alleviating congestion issues and pollution around the capital. And it's already been green-lighted by the Tourism Ministry, the Finance Ministry, and the Ministries of Planning and Housing. But signatories of the petition, which include Israel Prize winners and former Antiquities Authority officials, say the Transportation Ministry wasn't even consulted, and they argue that it's as if the Tourism Ministry decided to set up a medical tourism hospital without consulting the Health Ministry in the process. The petition also says that projections of the visual impact of the cable cars are not realistic, and that even if everything else was in line, the interim government cannot sign off on such a massive project anyway. Then on the sidelines, many other researchers, preservation experts, and tour guides also argued that the plan is politically irresponsible, will spoil the unique views of the Old City, and will fail to actually solve any problems with traffic and the like. The Tourism Ministry and Jerusalem Mayor Moshe Leon, on the other hand, still strongly support the initiative, boasting how the whole 1 mile or 1.5 kilometer long track will take just 5 minutes or less to travel, while stopping at most of the major tourism spots in the city. Moving on, Israel is unfortunately pretty used to defending itself against biased votes in international forums, but a new Israeli-led resolution is now getting near unanimous approval at the United Nations. Some 147 countries all voted in favor of the Agricultural Technologies for Development resolution at the United Nations General Assembly on Tuesday. Israel proposed the resolution as part of the UN Secretary General's goal to promote sustainable development, and everyone hopes that Israel's agro-technologies on offer will be able to help improve access to advanced agricultural capabilities.
Today, the agricultural technologies we developed are being used by and improving the lives of millions around the world. With the global population rising, increasing urbanization, and unreliable growing conditions resulting from climate change, we all must seek ways to produce more using less.
Only the Arab League countries, who usually vote against Israel automatically, refused to vote in favor. But seemingly out of reluctance to kill such an amazing opportunity, the Arab League abstained rather than vote against the resolution, and Israel knows it. Israeli ambassador to the UN, Dani Danon, says that the countries that chose not to support the resolution are the very ones that need it the most, adding that their decision to stick to their political biases only ends up harming their own citizens who are thirsty for the technology and opportunities outlined in this resolution. The resolution's text encourages youth-focused agricultural projects, including training and financial inclusion services, and it also highlights sustainable use and management of water and other resources. Now, talk about a true 180. Here is a story that you really don't want to miss, because it seems that an Iranian athlete is now heading to Israel to compete. ILTV's Nittany Manson reports.
It's been a month now since the International Judo Federation barred Iranian-based athletes from competing over their continued refusal to face off against Israeli opponents, and the IFJ says the ban is indefinite, ending only when the regime in Tehran ends its long-running boycott against the Jewish state. But now you might remember that certain Iranian athletes are already braving the consequences of opposing their home state's policy. Saeed Moulai, for example, fled Iran for Germany after he was forced to intentionally lose the World Championship match in Tokyo against Israeli judoka Sagi Muki. And now that he's been granted refugee status, he says he's free to concentrate fully on judo as part of an international refugee team. Taking things one step further, though, is 23-year-old Mohamed Rashnon-Ezhad, who similarly fled his native Iran over the boycott policy. And he has also recently been granted refugee status in Holland, where he's been living for the past 2 years and competing under the refugee flag. In fact, he was one of only 2 refugee athletes to medal in the Budapest Grand Prix, earning the bronze. And now he's finally setting his sights on his first Israeli mashups, as the Tel Aviv Grand Prix reports that Rashnon-Ezhad has officially registered for the January competition. He'll be competing in the under 60 kilogram weight class, and we wish him the best of luck.
Dancing salsa can be a great way to meet people here in Tel Aviv, and many people love to get out on the floor after work. But one woman who made her way to Israel from Australia is now taking the dance more seriously, and she has a new partner from the salsa capital of the world. Shannon has that story.
What's a Jewish woman? I love this place and I plan on creating an empire in Israel. Some people overseas don't even think that we dance salsa here in Israel, that we're allowed to wear the costumes that we're allowed to wear. It's felt quite special to hold the Israeli flag.
Obviamente conocí a Alicia y decidimos bailar juntos, decidimos hacer algo para mostrar lo que ella sabe y lo que yo sé.
This is Christian and this is Alyssa, and they're both salsa champions.
I'm a bit of a firecracker. It's like two beasts coming together.
Alyssa Shriki was born and raised in Australia. The nation is a longtime competitor in the Latino dance community, a 6-time world samba champion, and taking the top spot in Israel's national competition. Alyssa's considered Israel's #1 salsa dancer.
Hey, hey.
Christian David Montenegro has been dancing since the age of 9. Where he's from, it's just as important as doing your homework.
Connection.
Soy de Cali, la capital mundial de la salsa.
After studying at a world-renowned dance academy in Colombia, Montenegro received offers to dance Colombian salsa from Miami, Singapore, Spain, and Norway. He chose the Holy Land.
Me siento muy bien, ¿sabes? Porque soy el, digamos, por decirlo así, el pionero en la salsa caleña aquí en Israel. Con mi estilo, no hay otro bailarín, digamos, que se mantenga en el gremio como tal, como yo.
Aside from loving dance, both of these stars have one common passion, and it's Israel.
I'm Zionist.
Sentí algo especial y cuando volví a Colombia dije, si algún día voy a cambiar de país o voy a vivir en algún lado, yo creo que va a ser en Israel.
Montenegro has been in Israel for about 3 years and Shriki for 5. After dancing solo for a while, the two decided to work together and just took the top spot at Israel's national salsa competition.
אל המקום הראשון הגיעו קריסטיאן מונטנגרו ואליסה שריקי.
Alyssa and Christian get together several times a week for practice, but even with all that time, they still have a little problem.
5, 6, 7. I thought maybe this part I have.
Okay,
yeah.
Okay. 1, 2, 3. Entiendo inglés, que siento miedo al hablar y pena.
Things seem to be working well. So well that they even had a moment to teach me.
¿Quieres bailar?
Sí, gracias.
And 1, 2, 3, Kalima. 5, 6, 7.
What is your favorite part about Latin dance?
Everything. The music, the costumes, the passion.
Me gusta la preparación, la espera, las ansias de que llegue el día, preparar el vestuario. Todos los días respiro baile.
Next week is one of 2 World Latin Dance Cups. One is in the US and one is in Colombia.
The Colombian one is the one we're getting ready for, and it would be really special for us to go because, as you know, Chris is Colombian.
Since the Israeli national competition, Shriki and Montenegro have been fielding requests for workshops and shows all around the globe. But while they figure out their bookings, they have something else they're trying to work on.
I need to start learning a little bit of Spanish, and he needs to start learning some English.
Sí, funciona.
And now Shanna Fold is actually here with us in the studio. Shanna,
hi.
I'm so happy that you got to dance a little bit in that story. It looked like so much fun.
I had a great time. I love Latino dance. I love all things Latino, and this was really a treat for me.
No, I mean, it looked incredible, and thank you so much for that piece, because I wish them the best of luck in Colombia, and this is just, it's so cool. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I kind of always wanted to learn myself, like maybe I should take my wife, but don't tell her that, because then she'll want me to actually do it.
You have, now that you said it, you're held to your word.
Exactly. But at any rate, right now, as we all know, is Thanksgiving.
It's Thanksgiving.
It's Thanksgiving.
I love Thanksgiving.
It's like one of the best food days of the year.
Yes.
But here in Israel, most people don't really, at least they might not know too much about Thanksgiving, even though they might even be going to a Thanksgiving.
Yeah. Well, so Thanksgiving is an American holiday, but there's so many Americans here in Thanksgiving, here in Israel, and I was wondering, what do Israelis know about Thanksgiving? And actually, I got started thinking about it when I went to the shuk to look for a turkey for my own Thanksgiving dinner that I was going to make, and the guy said to me, "Ma ze Thanksgiving, ze chag?" And then he said, what is it, Thanksgiving? It's a holiday? So I said yes. So I actually went out into the streets today. I asked some people what they knew about Thanksgiving.
Oh boy.
I want to read you a couple of the funny responses.
I would love to hear this.
Okay, one older gentleman told me that he believed in America people eat Turkish chicken.
Turkish chicken? I love that, because if you translate in Hebrew, the word for turkey is tanegol hodu, which hodu is Turkey, like the country.
Okay.
Which again, you can shorten that when you're talking about the meat, just give me some hodu, and they'll kind of know what you mean, but in general...
The full version.
Yeah, but the full version translates to Turkish chicken.
Turkish chicken, so he said...
That's actually awesome.
He said, I know that they eat Turkish chicken, and he said it's a nice holiday that everybody celebrates together in the United States. I thought that was very cute. There was one guy who said, I would love to go to an American Thanksgiving, but unfortunately, none of my American friends have invited me to one.
Hint?
I'm booked.
So you didn't extend the invitation. That's so rude.
Yeah, and actually, one woman I spoke with couldn't stop to talk to me because she was on her way to the preschool where they were hosting a Thanksgiving dinner for all the American parents.
But do they, obviously, as Americans, we kind of know that the Thanksgiving we celebrate today has a little bit of a darker history. Do Israelis know any of that?
So actually, a couple of the answers that I got from Israelis, which I thought was very sweet, they said they didn't know what the origin of the holiday was, but they did know that it was a day to give thanks, and that they are always giving thanks. A couple of Israelis told me they don't need Thanksgiving because they always give thanks. They didn't really know the backstory. One woman I spoke with said she thought it was about the origin, and I said, you mean the pilgrims? And she said, yes, that's what I meant.
Okay, well, it seems like some people are kind of hit or miss. Either way, happy Thanksgiving.
Happy
Thanksgiving to everybody. Shanna, happy Thanksgiving. Good luck with your dinner tomorrow.
You.
And I think that's it for today.
Tonight.
Yeah, that's right. All right. And now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight should be clear to partly cloudy and cool with average lows of around 54 or 12 degrees Celsius. Then over the weekend, you can expect mostly sunny skies and little change in temperatures. The highs will hover at about 74 or 23 degrees Celsius. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.47 shekels to the American dollar. For more news from ILTV, please like ILTV on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube. I'm Aaron Porras. Thank you for watching.